give me one shot here on a blue chip stock, believe me, Kevin, the only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Nobody knows if the stock is gonna go up, down, sideways, or in circles.
What's going on, NBA draft fans? Your boys are back, the Wolves of Ball Street, your favorite draft analyst. It is the NBA Draft Show on the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed. My name is Corey Tulaba. I am here, as always, with my co-host, Albert Garbage Time Gim, ladies and gentlemen. Albert, what's cracking, bro?
All is good. All is exciting. We're talking NBA draft today. The NFL draft is coming up. Baseball's around the corner. It's a good time of the year. You know, we get a lot of sports stuff. I don't know, Corey, if you're a hockey guy. I'm not, but hockey's happening.
Playoffs happening soon.
Happening soon. The Rangers can't lose. They're winning every damn game. I'm not even a hockey fan.
I'm a white, suburban guy from New York. Of course, I'm a Ranger.
Go Rangers. But yeah, it's great to be on. I'm really excited to talk today, man. I mean, the pair of guys that we're going to be talking about today, Corey, I can already tell the type of energy we're going to have just from what we were talking about before we started recording too, but it's going to be awesome.
It is going to be awesome because these guys rock. Last week, we jumbo-sized our episode covering Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey. Today, we're going to shrink it down and cover Jared McCain and Devin Carter. So which one of these dudes do you want to jump into first?
It's such a hard choice. I like both. Maybe we go Carter first.
Okay. Yeah, I can get down with some Devin Carter energy. I just got to see Devin in the Big East tournament, which was, I guess, like 2 weeks ago now. And he was one of the guys that I just came away with so impressed. Like, he was just so impressive. Like, I don't want to say he like blew me away, but he definitely stood out for me from the group of games in that conference. So Devin Carter is a 6'3" guard. He's listed at 195. He will be 22.3 years old on draft night. He played 35.3 minutes per game this season, averaging 19.7 points per game, 8.7 rebounds per game. Crazy number. 3.6 assists per game to 2.7 turnovers, 1.8 steals, 1 block. Splits of 47.3, 37.7, 74.9. That 38% from three was on 6.8 attempts per game. 5.2 free throw attempts per game. So 59.7 true shooting percentage, 56.4 effective field goal, PER 25.6, BPM of 12.2. He was unranked on the DraftDAC IPO coming into the year. Had a lot of stuff that he needed to work with or work on. Like, the shot percentage was pretty rough. But he has come on strong. His draft stock has shot up. Currently, ESPN has him at 16. No Ceilings has him at 31. And I think he's going to rise on the next one for sure, because this was early March. I remember, saying his name in the mock a couple of times, and guys seeming to just be like breezing over it. And now I think everyone's a little bit more on board. Bleacher Report has him at 16. The Ringer had him at 13. The Athletic had him at 22. Tankathon at 19. Average stock price of 19.5. So, Albert, I ask you, is Devin Carter stock price too high, too low, or is it just right at 19.5?
So just up until like 3 seconds ago, I was going to say that's just right, but I'm thinking about it, Corey, and I'm adaptable. I'm learning, right? We're all learning. We're all trying to get better. And the thing that I'm thinking about was even this morning, right? KOC drops his latest mock draft, has Devin Carter going to 16 to the Miami Heat, and I'm looking at that and I'm like, Devin Carter 16, Miami Heat, sure, I could see it. right? So I'm gonna say that it's too low, because after doing the real final deep dive, maybe not final, I'll probably do another one, right? But doing like a real official deep dive on Devin Carter, I walked away really, really impressed. And there's gonna be so much to talk about when it comes to his game. But at this point, I have him at 23 on my big board, but I could see him moving up, especially after this pod. So yeah, I'm gonna say too low.
I also think that it's slightly too low. I have him at around 16 right now on my board, because he does have flaws. Like, he rocks, but
Yeah.
he definitely has some flaws. But if you're doing a board, and part of it is the projection part of it, and part of it is like, it's not a power ranking.
Right.
Like, you have to take into account that some of these guys are going to improve at the next level. Some of the younger guys are going to get better, with age, development, opportunity, all of that. So I think 16 is fair, but I would definitely put money that he's going to be one of the 14 best players in this draft. Like, when we look back, like, this is a guy who to me is a pro. Like, I think he's going to be like an actual roster guy, not somebody who's like, constantly in the G League trying to find a home. Like, he's going to be a guy who's actually on the floor doing things that impact games. He might bounce around throughout his career. I think he probably will, because I think when you look at, like, the history of his kind of archetype, like, those guys tend to play on a lot of winning teams, and so they bounce around from team to team, typically shorter contracts, especially as they become veterans. But 16 seems right.
Yeah. No, I agree, Corey. And once again, everything that you're saying, I mean, we're about to get into the weeds with his game, but there's I think, like, if I had to pick a word to describe him, kind of as like the theme for the Devin Carter aspect of this pod, I think it's just impact. He's like an impact guy. He's going to leave his imprint on the game. And I think finding a guy who can do the things that he does and is going to, find a way to impact the game as much as I think he will. 16 feels a little bit too low. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll get into it, but I think you having it at 16, probably closer to where I'll end up with him being on my board. But yeah, I'm excited for this one.
Okay, so if you had $10 to invest,
here we go,
in Devin Carter, Tyler Kolek, and KJ Simpson, how would you spend that $10?
I kind of hate this question, because just this morning I was watching some KJ Simpson and thinking to myself, I might be too low on him. And this is like, and I keep saying this, right? But I saw KJ Simpson live, and it might have been his worst game ever against UCLA. But just watching him, I just still really like him a lot. And I'm not going to let one game affect my eval of a guy. Shit. Okay. Let's do this. I think, God, because Kolek's a badass too. Let's do. Okay. We'll do 3.5 to Devin Carter, 3.5 to Tyler Kolek. That gets us to 7, right? And then 3 to KJ Simpson.
Yeah, I like that. Man, because I feel like I'm selling KJ a little bit short here, because I'm going to give him 2. But
okay.
Look, I mean, I need to go back through his numbers, see where he ended up ultimately. But when I did my piece on small guards, and kind of compared them statistically, averaging out, like, of guards that have gotten drafted in like the last 5 or 6 drafts, what their statistics looked like in their pre-draft year. And then, I did a whole bunch of math and whatever. KJ blew the model out of the water, like, straight up. Like, he's good. He hit a game winner in the tournament, right? Like, really, really played well. He's a strong, solid dude. I like him a lot, but I'm still only going to give him $2 here.
Sure.
I think I'm going to give $425 to Devin, $375 to Tyler Kolek. And I think that gets me to 10. And honestly, like, it's not going to surprise me if any of these three guards become the best guard in this trio. Like if Tyler Kolek is ultimately the best guard down the line, I'm gonna be like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So,
I mean, with these three, Corey, well, once again, bravo to you again with this trio, because you're always so good at finding these trios. But we're really splitting hairs, in my opinion, when it comes to these guys. Like, I think they're all smaller guards, but they all have their different strengths and weaknesses. But they're all like pretty goddamn impactful, and they were in college. And I mean, all three of them carried their teams at times or for big chunks of the season. So, no, I'm right there with you. I think it's really hard, which is why like I kind of got to the pretty even split with the three, but I could see it your way too with Devin Carter. So I don't know how you come up with these trios, but this one was good too. Oh, I think you're muted. Oh yeah, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. So you mentioned like how you would describe him in like one word. You mentioned his energy, all of that. Do you remember when we did Keon Johnson's episode and you described him as having Tasmanian devil energy?
Yeah.
I think Devin has like the Tasmanian devil energy, maybe on steroids.
With the hair.
Yeah. Like he's got the real Tasmanian devil energy. Like that's the thing that stood out to me the most. Like watching Devin in person, like you could see it on the screen, like how hard he plays, the effort that he gives. But like you mentioned the imprint, like he always leaves an imprint on the game. You never have to question like if he's on the court. Like he's not just going to go hide and disappear. Like he's going to do something to where you're like, okay, Devin Carter's on the floor. There he is, right? Like he doesn't have the ball in his hands. He doesn't stay stationary. Like he'll move around and stuff, and we'll get into it. Like I just, especially like in the game against Creighton that I was at, dude, like sometimes I just forget that Trey Alexander's on the floor. Like I get it with Trey Alexander, like good measurements, like he shot it well last year, whatever. Like he does some nice things, but there are times I'm just like, what is Trey on the floor? Like I never questioned that with Devin Carter. And like when you have them on the floor at the same time, to me, it just really felt like you could just measure something immeasurable.
Yeah. I mean, well, first, oh man, that's such a, Corey. Like I think with him, first off, like the Trey thing, the classic Tobias Harris syndrome, right? It's just, sometimes you just go missing. With Devin, it's an energy thing, it's an impact thing, it's a personality thing. When I was writing my notes on Devin, the thing that came to mind was like, I mean, Corey, you and I are both from New York. We've played a good amount of basketball, blacktop everywhere, right? You'll just end up with guys in the gym that are just in your shirt all the time and breathing in your face and pulling on your shorts and scratching you, refusing to give up easy layups, just constantly physical, running around, yapping, just full energy, full go all the time is Devin Carter. That I think that's what he is. He's like the typical agitator type in the gym that you love having on your team, but also hate going against. But when you play pickup, you'll end up with a guy on your team, and also not a lot. So you have this like healthy respect slash hatred for the guy. Is Devin Carter? He is that guy. And for Providence this year, he was, as you said, Corey, extremely impactful. You felt him all over the floor on both sides of the floor. And I think we're not doing, sell me this pen right now, but that's going to be the sell with him, right? He's just that influence, impact, energy, just all that stuff with him is so palpable, I think. So we're about to get into it, but it's just everywhere with him.
Absolutely. So let's shout out everybody who's watching live. If you're watching live on YouTube, make sure that you hit that like button, share it, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're not subscribed, if you're watching on Twitter, make sure you hop in the chat, participate along with everybody else as well. So let's start with the shooting because, shot almost 7 threes a game this season and shot, at 38%. So, clearly had a really strong shooting year, 75% from the free throw line on really good volume. So obviously that's not 85%, but it's, a decent enough marker, right? So where did you come around ultimately on the shooting for Devin?
I think this was the part of our pod today that I was most interested to hear from you, Corey. I'll share my thoughts really quickly, just because you are the shot doctor. I had some questions. There are certain things I could not deny. The first thing that I wrote here that I was excited to talk about, he took 223 threes this season. That's some pretty heavy volume. As you mentioned, almost 7 attempts. He was at 6.8 attempts per game, 37.7% from three this year. Okay, so just my thoughts, and I'm ready to hear your feedback. So first thing, I didn't feel like his jumper was the smoothest jumper I've seen this year or ever in my life. I thought there were some moving parts to it. The first thing that I wanted to say was, at times, especially on misses, I thought he would do the Amen Thompson arm fading thing to the right thing at times. Didn't happen all the time, but when it was there, and I wanted to mention it. But at the same time, so going back and forth, I love the confidence that he had in his shot. He took a lot of them. He was not afraid to take them. I thought sometimes there were a lot of threes that he hit that really shifted the momentum. And it was just like, hey, I'm an alpha and I'm going to leave my imprint on this game. And part of me leaving that imprint on this game is me taking this huge three and nailing it in your face. So there was a confidence, like bravado aspect of his shooting that I actually really enjoyed. I also thought sometimes, like especially on misses, his base would get a little bit narrow. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's with his knees or something. It wasn't always the case, so it's not like a major concern, but it was there from time to time. As I mentioned before, it felt like when it's good, but then when it's not so good, it feels like you can feel the different parts of his jumper not being completely connected. Was another thing that I put in there, and those are all the critiques I had in terms of his shooting. But once again, like I want to acknowledge the volume. I want to acknowledge the fact that he hit 37.7%, right there, 38%. I wouldn't make the claim that I think he's a pure shooter by any stretch of the imagination. However, the numbers are there. And, if it was a small amount, then, we get back to like the Derek Williams type of conversation where he shot 40% in Arizona, but how many was he taking? All that stuff. So I'm ready to pass it over to you, Corey, to hear your expertise on this. But for me, I walked away like so Corey, remember earlier in the pod, you mentioned how we were doing a mock draft and then you had brought up Devin Carter's name and, it was kind of met with some silence, right? I was part of the silence. And the reason why was because before I did my full deep dive on him, I had real questions about the jumper. My biggest question was, I love the energy. I love the impact. I just don't know if I believe in the shot. But then after doing the deep dive, I'm like, well, shit, he took a lot of them and he took them with so much confidence. Who am I to believe? Like if he shot 37% on that volume, he goes to the NBA, he continues to work on it. We know he's going to be a work hard type of guy. Who's to say it's not going to get better? So that's kind of where I'm at, Corey. I guess my ultimate answer is I'm kind of in between, but I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
No, I think I'm kind of in between on the shot too. Like when I wrote about him for my Big East scouting notes, I think he's more of a shot maker than a shooter. Because if you watch him shoot, you're not necessarily like, ugh, look at that form. Like his form's fine. It's not smooth. It's not perfect. It's not Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, but it's not broken. And you talk about the volume, and it's also like he takes some tough shots too. And he's taking them from range. Like he's pulling up from the logo. Like he is fearless in the attempts that he takes. So like the fact that he's taking 37% or hitting 37% of his 7 threes a game while taking a lot of tough ones, there's something impressive about that just based on the numbers. I went back on the dive and I looked at his form from last year where he shot like 29% because he's been sub 30 the last 2 years. And it looks so much cleaner this year than last year. Like he was doing that one motion catapult and I fucking hate that form. Like it's just, like the Steph Curry effect of all the people who want to shoot like Steph. And it's literally just like, oh, so you're not strong enough to shoot for real. So you have to do this little kid shoot and it's like, Steph is like a special person. And like, it's hard to replicate that. But this year he smoothed it out and it's much less of like a one motion shot. And I don't know, maybe you would call it like a 1.5. Like there is still like that maybe slight hitch sometimes on the jumper. And there is still a little bit of the catapult, but he's much more patient with the shot and he doesn't look like he's throwing the ball up in the air anymore. Like he looks like he's actually shooting it instead of catapulting it. So I think there has been, and maybe it's reps, maybe the training that he had, he just worked out, whatever the kink was in it. So I think that clearly he worked on it. And part of the upward trajectory is he just is a better shooter now. So there's the confidence, there's the fact that he's gotten better as a shooter from working on the functionality and the mechanics of it. And I like that he's not just a guy who's like shooting it off the bounce, because when we talk about his self-creation, like I don't think he's like a super creative, like self-creator. Like he doesn't have a deep bag, like a little bag and you can hit like a step back, but like the more dribbles that he takes, like the more danger he puts himself in almost, which, honestly is the case for a lot of guys. Like most guys who are really good scorers are really efficient with their moves, and the more, moves that you have to get to, it means the defense is doing its job and you're probably going to take a tougher shot. And sometimes it does feel like that for him. Like some of his misses are pretty tough, like off the glass, side of the backboard, air ball, whatever. A lot of times he won't like shoot with a follow through. He'll high five it. So, his misses can be pretty rough. And that's why you're like really, really good shooters. Like their misses are like, they look good still. It's just like, oh, they missed that one. His are like, oh, it's like in the NBA when you do that little like thing where you on the bench where a guy's going to be like, he might get hit by the rebound, by the ricochet of it. So they just like get out of the way, even if they're not even on the court. So it still needs to be honed. I think he's going to get easier shots in the NBA, that he's not going to have to take some of the really, really tough ones. So like, I think that his optimal role as a shooter and just ultimately as a player is going to be like off ball, play with a big lead initiator, can do a little bit of it, not going to dribble the ball off of his foot, like can create a little bit, isn't going to be the guy you want to run stuff through necessarily, but can space the floor, can do a little bit off movement. And like, what I like about his movement is not only like, because you have to respect him as a shooter a little bit at this point. So when he is knocking down shots, especially off movement, what he's super, super good at is like leveraging that to like curl the action and get into the paint. So I like him in that off ball role a lot. And like, I don't think most people expected him to be such a like, like this on ball lead creator guy who's like vaulting himself into the potentially the lottery discussion. But he showed he can do it a little bit. Now let's get him with somebody who it's like, oh, he's playing off Giannis now and Dame. Like, oh, he's playing off Luka. Oh, he's playing off LeBron. Like one of these LaMelo, like, I don't know. He's playing off these guys now and he's getting way easier looks. Like that's ultimately what I think he needs to be at the next level of, like, to optimize his shooting.
Yeah, Corey, or off of Bam and Jimmy, right? Another one.
Yeah, right.
We've seen what Bam can do for shooters in Miami. Corey, I love everything that you said, and with going back to just like the mechanics and his form, you and I both in our mid-30s, we come from an era where we grew up watching like pure, beautiful shooters, right? Like an Allen Houston or Glenn Rice or Del Curry, these types of guys, right? And Devin Carter is just not that. And, Corey, you mentioned the catapult type of shooting thing. You'll see it sometimes, like sometimes on shots, he's shooting from his face and you're just like, well, it's not the beautiful, it's not the prettiest, it's not the best, but it's this thing where I think Corey, he, whether it's his shooting or his game overall, there's an energy about him that just changes your mind. And that's where I'm landing with his shooting, where I wanted to not like him as a shooter. I wanted to critique everything. I wanted to say he's not a shooter, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, he just has this way about him. It's like, you're going to respect me. And you mentioned it, Corey. This year, he's garnered that respect from defenders, where coming into the season, they might have been like, yeah, you're sub 30 the last 2 years. I'm not respecting you. He's like, word, I'm just going to keep shooting in your face, or not in your face. You're going to give me the space. I'm going to keep shooting it. And he kept hitting him. And he ended up at 37.7% on the year, right? And so there is this energy about him, this spirit to him, I think, that he's willing to do what it takes to change your mind. And I think we're going to kind of find that energy in every aspect of his game that we talk about today. And so I think ultimately, Corey, I'm right there with you. I see him more as a shot maker than like a pure shooter. He's not Glenn Rice, is I think fair to say for both of us, but he is going to garner respect. And I think in terms of NBA role, future-wise, Corey, he might be a guy off the bench, giving you 20 minutes a game, taking maybe 3 or 4 three-pointers a game, but, maybe even shooting at a higher percentage than he did in college because of, less volume, but much cleaner looks. Like we've mentioned, right, with like dribble handoffs with Bam Adebayo or whoever he ends up with, or, he's working on the weak side corner with Dallas for Luka. He's going to end up on a better team. Like, just as an example, and I know we're going to bring him up later, but I was going to bring him up later, but a guy like Miles McBride, right, who comes off the bench right now for the Knicks, or now he's starting because of injury, but he's playing like 48 minutes a game right now. But a guy who didn't come into the league as a renowned shooter, but really worked on it. And, he plays next to a Jalen Brunson, and it makes sense, right? Because what he offers and what Jalen Brunson does as a primary guy. So I 100% agree with everything you said.
Yeah. And, and if you're watching live, you see some of the clips too, like how he's leveraging that shot to get into the paint. Like, when he's doing like the self-creation thing, like one of the things that he does a lot is like he gets into like the in-between area and he just like crab dribbles his way in because, he sees like, Ryan Kalkbrenner coming over or Donovan Clingan. He's like, oh shit, like I don't have enough momentum to like go up and like finish here. So he gets like a little stuck. And I think on his like in between float game, like I don't think he has like super great touch there. It's not like a super big part of his game either. The mid-range shot, like a lot of times he'll kind of get to like, the logo underneath like the nail and kind of like have to do like, the dip the shoulder to create a little separation, do like a little fadeaway thing, like off one leg. So I think that shot's pretty okay for him. It's not like something I think, he'll get to a lot at the next level, but I think, he's super when he does leverage it and he uses it to get momentum. And like, if you put him with a Bam, who's going to be able to hit him on a cut, like he's got real bounce to finish at the rim and above it. And he's got really like his arms are like apparently long. Like you don't have to guess that he's going to measure with a really plus wingspan, which is going to allow him to ultimately play bigger, helps him a little bit with his rebounding where he's a maniac. But like he finishes with like extension finishes, very right side dominant, like when he's trying to get downhill and, it's a lot of like the scoop layups with the extension, but I think over 60%, I think he was at like 64 or something like that, like at the rim. So good finisher, doesn't have like, the Kyrie, like high off the glass touch, stuff like that, but just like keeps it very simple near the rim. Like ultimately, I think like all this stuff leads to the point of like his offensive scoring package is going to be like pretty simple at the next level. And like, I think that that's like a really good thing for young players who are going to come in, especially as role players, where it's like, all right, you don't have to do too much. Like you can just play your game and you don't like, and you can find ways to fill in gaps on the margins. And I think that that's how, it allows guys to be successful early.
I agree, Corey. I think sometimes, and this happens to me too, I think sometimes when we get into our evals, we forget that we forget context. and we forget situation. And we just focus on like what the player has done in college. We put him in a vacuum, and we don't really consider what it's going to look like on the next level, which is kind of important, right? With Devin, though, watching him, it's pretty plain and simple. A lot of the stuff that he did offensively, I think he just straight up won't be either asked to do, allowed to do, or just like straight up won't need to do on the next level at being like this primary high usage guy. I think he's over 20% this year for Providence, right? It's just not going to happen, right? At least not in the first couple of years, in my opinion. And I think when you put this type of energy, right, and the type of game that he has into a smaller role, it might even be more impactful, right? Just in terms of like you get this in a shorter spurt, and he doesn't have to conserve his energy for the end of the game. Like he can really cause some havoc. And just going back to your point about like the length and the athleticism too, he doesn't look 6'3" to me. And I think part of that is because number one, the athleticism and the length. Like when he goes up for dunks, it's like he's not, these aren't like Jalen Brunson cheapies. They're actually like two-handed, like he's getting up there and he's dunking down the ball, right? Like he's that type of athlete. Yeah, he has that type of athleticism and that type of length. And so, I think that's really important when we're talking about influential or effective perimeter guard defenders, right? You look at any of the top guard defenders in the league, they can be smaller, right? But there's a length and athleticism aspect to them that helps them, strength aspect that helps them a lot, that makes up for the lack of height. And I already mentioned a guy like Miles McBride, crazy long arms, great feet, great anticipation, great strength. Devin Carter we're not talking about defense right now, but Devin Carter just having that length and athleticism, I think goes a long way for him. And then once again, if you put that into a smaller package, smaller volume / usage, it might even become more influential and more effective to, winning basketball games.
Yeah, he's going to measure well. Like when both of these dudes that we're going to talk about today, and Devin Carter and Jared McCain, are listed at 6'3". Devin Carter's listed at 195. Jared McCain's listed at 197. Devin Carter just straight up looks like taller.
Yeah.
Than Jared McCain does. But yeah, I mean, he uses those physical gifts really, really well on both ends. So now I think we can touch on his playmaking a little bit. I don't think that his playmaking is like crazy, like one of the, I wasn't like, oh my God, look at how he's manipulating this ball screen by, reading the low man, and then he's hitting the weak side corner because the guy is too low. Like he didn't do a ton of that as a playmaker. It was a lot of like, oh, he's coming off a DHO, he's getting dribble penetration and a paint touch. Now he's going to kick it out to the shooter in the opposite corner. Like it's a lot of like reactive passing instead of like, elite point guard playmaking stuff. If he had that other stuff, like, yeah, he's, easily a top 10 pick. If he was also able to manipulate, like easily like top 5 probably. So it's just like a lot of reactive passing. So like, I think he is a pretty good passer. He stays patient. Like, in the clip we just saw, he did that little crab dribble in the paint. He's in no man's land. It's like, where is he going? But he's like, because his arms are so long, he can keep the ball really low to the ground. And like take care of it. So he doesn't like panic when he gets himself in those situations. At the next level, he might have to panic a little bit more because there's going to be a lot of length that's able to make him pay. But I think he's very capable of making basic reads, and he's not going to have to like do this crazy stuff that's going to make him like, a turnover issue or anything like that.
Yeah, I think Corey, for me, it didn't bother me at all that he wasn't a great playmaker. It just, I think something that I did write in my notes is that I think because of the role that he played in college and, the higher usage that he had, it did lead to some, not so great moments at times. Right. And I think that's normal because something that, okay, I do want to like talk about this, right? So Tommy D on Twitter recently has been talking about guys on the Knicks like Dante DiVincenzo, Isaiah Hartenstein, Josh Hart, and talking about how they are kind of overachieving right now as players. And I think a lot of people on Twitter took that as a slight against those players. And I'm kind of with him. I don't see it that way at all. Sometimes, depending on opportunity and circumstance, players will overachieve and play better than maybe what they're usually capable of or expected to do, right? And I think with Devin Carter, like I think within the role that he was asked to play, like he did a ton for this Providence team. And at times, I think he overachieved in terms of his scoring and playmaking. But when I say that, that's not me slighting his ability. I just don't think that, his playmaking and passing ability is an elite strength of his, is my ultimate point. I think he made some good plays because he was asked to do them, but then also because he was kind of stretched and, put into a role that ultimately won't be his role on the next level, it did lead to some mistakes at times too, right? And not like the most beautiful moments of playmaking ever. But to your point, Corey, I think it's just fine. I think it's functional. I think he can pass. He can make the right pass when he needs to, but he's also not going to be the guy that you hand him the keys and you go, "Hey, I want you to drive the car or drive the bus all the time." That's just not going to be his role. So ultimately, when we get to his eval, it's some people may use that as like a slight and be like, "Oh, Devin Carter's not a primary playmaker," or whatever. For me, it's like, yeah, he's not a primary playmaker, and that's just fine because that's not the role he's going to be asked to play. So I hope that made sense.
No, it does make sense. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities to use him as creative ways as a playmaker. Cause he's a good playmaker. Like he's fine to good, right? Like he's not lead your team good, but like he's capable of making some slick reads. Again, and get a lot of reactionary stuff. Like I think at the next level, like you can use him in inverted pick and rolls and let him, kind of get into that short roll area where he can like kind of tear guys up and like use his quickness and like the threat of his ability to kind of like blow by that level and finish with extension to where like guys have to kind of collapse and rotate. And like, so I think he's going to be able to be used in scenarios where like his passing will be a benefit at the next level. Like even if he's not, doing the Chris Paul manipulate guys type thing. Okay, let's get to the fun stuff with Devin's game. And that is his defense. Like this is the side of the floor where like this is why you're like, oh, he might actually be a lottery pick. Like it's why he's been in the top 10 of some mocks. Like he came in at number 10 on the Bleacher Report mock a few weeks ago. And then he was on like a Ringer mock at top 10 at one point. So like, it's because he is a two-way guy who just fucking battles his ass off. Like he is just a monster defensively in every sense of the word. Like, he's only had synergy tracked. I think it was only like 14 ISOs or something like that. Maybe it was 15 this year. And, team scored like 13% on those. Right. He is just a dude who will absolutely just smother you. Like he is wearing your clothes when he is on the ball. Like if he's left on an island with you, he's up in your shit. He's closing distance. He is sliding with you. He is your shadow, like Peter Pan shit. So, and then he's got that length. Like you put him in a ball screen, he gets so skinny and just stays attached. Like he will stay attached. And then, when he's guarding in that drop just there, like we're seeing in the clip here, like the shooter thinks that they're free to pull up and he's just coming from behind and defending the rear view and using his length to recover and get a piece of the ball, or at least, make you think like nothing's clean. Everything is hard. And then because of his size, like his length and his strength and his instincts, like he can guard multiple positions.
Corey, I almost like freaked out when you're talking about how he gets skinny, because watching him, I was just like, this guy's insane coming off. Like his screen navigation is like unbelievable. And then that block you just saw on Tristan Newton, like he does so much of that. And it goes back to my earlier point. Like I was trying not to talk about the defense when I was making that point earlier about length, but it's like, it's the biggest. You see the biggest impact with him in terms of like his length giving him an advantage defensively, because as we mentioned, he's listed at 6'3", but he just feels so much bigger, and a big part of that is the athleticism / length. You mentioned it, Corey. Like, we're gonna get into the McCain scout later, but like one of the biggest differences you feel between those two is when they're defending pick and roll. Like the way that Carter recovers to his man, and it just never feels like the perimeter guy or the ball handler is going to get a clean look off of that action is just unbelievable with him. Also, we kind of mentioned this before, but just an insane rebounder. Like, to be a 6'3" guard and to average almost 9 boards a game is just absolutely just animal wild shit, right? And
dude, with his rebounding, like in person, like I was watching, like, all right, so is this like everybody else is letting him get rebounds, or like, one, he's got an insane nose for the ball, like he just knows how it's coming off the glass. But then like, dude, they were switching against Creighton, and like Kalkbrenner had him down low, like in the half circle, and he's just fucking boxing him out and like pushing him out. Like, it's not like, dude, 9 rebounds a game. Like, you know, some Russell Thomas in the comments says like, you know, very similar stats to Pods. Like the rebounding is a big, you know, reason he's gotten, you know, some comparison to Podziemski. Because 9 is ridiculous. And again, yeah, like whether he's 6'3" or maybe he measures really well at the combine, he's 6'4" or whatever, like the length, the instincts, like no matter how you slice it, to average 9 rebounds a game and finish play like that. Like he's capable of finishing plays in so many ways, whether it's a strong contest, whether it's blowing up a ball screen, whether it's coming over from the weak side and fucking volleyball spiking it, like whether it's picking a pocket, whether it's rebounding, he's a play finisher on defense. And a lot of times we hear play finisher as a term used on offense. And like Devin Carter is a play finisher on defense. Like as a coach, like this is one of those guys, like, you know, this dude's going to get on the court.
Yeah.
It may be like a Miles McBride. Like, I think he's going to get on the court much sooner than McBride did.
Yep.
But eventually he's going to get on it. And once he does, he ain't fucking coming off. Like McBride's going to be in the rotation regardless at this point, right? Like, sure, Brunson's going to come back and it's going to cut and eat into some of those minutes, but like ultimately, like he's going to be a rotation guy. Maybe not in the playoffs this year,
yeah.
Right? But like he is now established himself. Like, this is a dude who can play in the league. Like Devin Carter, he's a beast, man. Like defensively, like a coach is going to want this kind of guy on the court on this side of the ball, while the offense is like being honed and molded to be like whatever kind of, you know, role player. Like defensively, this dude is a monster. Like people are lucky he's 6'3".
Yeah.
Because if he was 6'8" with this energy,
he can conquer the world. Corey, I'm just, first off, imagine this dude on Miami, just like, get the fuck out of here, dude. That's just terrifying. Or like on Minnesota, and you just like just him coming off the bench with like Nas Reed and Jade McDaniels, and they're just like doing, you know, just closing shop on everybody, which just sounds unbelievable. But no, Corey, I'm right there with you. Like the thing with him is, and also the stuff that he's doing in passing lanes, it's like, hey man, just like, can you figure out a way to play basketball and cornerback in the NFL? Just what are we talking about here? Like, it's unbelievable. So I think the instincts, the length, the athleticism, the speed, the reaction time, the energy, the feistiness that he has. You mentioned Peter Pan, shadow thing, white on rice. Like, he's got it all, man. And it's like, and also like I at the same time hesitate from saying like he's a perfect defender, because I mean, how many perfect defenders are there out there in the world? But just like the influence and like the impact that he has and the consistency he has on that side of the ball, you should sign up for him every day of the week. And that's the thing, right? One of these smart teams that like always draft well and always know how to get the most out of their guys. That's, in my opinion, that's the exact type of team that's going to take him. So whatever version we think we are going to get of Devin Carter, we're probably going to see an even better version in the NBA, at least like defensively to start.
Yeah, I mean, look, he gives multiple efforts. Like he makes winning plays. Like he's an absolute stud on that end.
Yeah.
So we talked about Miami as like a team. You mentioned Minnesota. Are there any other teams that you think like, if you were investing in this guy, like this would be the team that could get, the most out of him?
I mean, look, if they didn't have a million guards, just what do you do if you put Devin Carter on the Magic? Obviously they need more shooting in that type of lineup, but it's just in a fantasy world, you have Devin Carter, Jalen Suggs, and Jonathan Isaac on the floor together. It's a rock fight. No one's ever going to score, right? It's just, if you look at Jalen Suggs and Jonathan Isaac, probably the two best defenders in the NBA this season, other than Rudy Gobert and a couple other guys. So insane. I don't know, Corey. Would you take him in Chicago to play with Alex Caruso? I would, and Kobe White. Like that's pretty insane stuff. I don't know. I just think once again, like him on a good defensive team. I'm not saying Chicago's a good defensive team, but you guys have Caruso, so
Chicago's been a good defensive team for, been a good defensive team. Billy
sure.
Donovan.
Actually, you're right. And DeRozan also deserves some credit, right? But I think
Williams when he's healthy.
Yep. But I think just putting him on like a good team is kind of where my head is at. Like I don't want, I think he works anywhere ultimately. Like even throw him on the Knicks, he's gonna figure it out, right? But I just want to see him on a good team because like I want to see him have an impact from day one, like in like high leverage games, because just watching his Providence stuff, like in close, tight games, like he's there and he wants it. And so I just want to see him early on in like high leverage type of situations and just what that looks like. Cause I think it'll be really exciting.
Yeah. And one other team that we didn't mention, like Phoenix, that kind of needs somebody in the short and long term, right? Like who can play that more simplified offensive role and then just be an absolute menace defensively and not have to like expend all of his energy there because he doesn't need to worry about scoring with Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant, and could play in those high leverage situations you were talking about. I think that would be really interesting as well. Okay. So if you're buying stock in Devin Carter, who may you have bought stock in previously?
Okay, so a couple of names here. Prospect chemistry. Guy I already mentioned 3 times already, Miles McBride. Hard not to think about him just because Miles McBride didn't come into the league as a dead-eye shooter. He's improved a ton. He's actually above 40% right now, and I think for the month of March, he's like 42%, something like that. Another name that came to my mind was like the absolute best version of Jose Alvarado, was something that I wrote down. Also, maybe Marcus Smart. Just thinking about his impact on the defensive side of the ball. Marcus obviously famously really wanted to play point guard for the Boston Celtics, and that kind of went the way that it went. I just feel like that type of archetype is where he's going to end up. He's going to be a smaller guard, but doesn't feel super small just because of his athleticism, strength, and length. But can in a pinch run your offense, is going to offer a ton of value in terms of his defensive rebounding. I just think, that type of player is kind of where my head's at.
Yeah, this was a hard one for me.
Yeah,
because he's pretty unique as a player. So I went like devil on your shoulder version of Brandon Pajemski. Like little more chaotic, and frenetic. Like strengths and weaknesses are flipped a little bit for both guys. And then like if you shrunk down Scotty Barnes, maybe like if you just pressed Scotty Barnes down and made him 6'3", Scotty obviously a much better playmaker. But like, I don't know, maybe if he was 6'3", and he couldn't see over all of the defenses so easily, maybe he'd play a little more frenetic too. But like just that chaotic energy, high motor guys who like will pick you up and just shadow you. And so, but he was hard. He was definitely hard, man.
Yeah, it's not easy with him just because once again, like you don't find a lot of guards like this. But the reason why I picked the guys that I did, and I like your guys too, right? With Pajemski, obviously, like it's these smaller guards that can fight and compete and be influential with even with their lack of size. I think is kind of where my head was at. So
yeah, no, I that's where it should be at. All right, the time has come, Albert. And I think you'll have fun with this one. Sometimes, you might not have as much fun, but this one I think you'll like. So it's time for you to sell me this pen on Devin Carter.
Here we go. So when it comes to Devin Carter, it's as simple as this. As an adult, sometimes you'll be in the street and you might run into somebody and end up in a street fight. If you were to ever end up in a street fight, you'd probably want somebody like Devin Carter. He's the type of guy who can maybe finish things up with, his fist, but also is willing to jump off a wall and do a Superman punch to end a fight as well. He's an absolute brawler of a player, crazy manic energy, but also doesn't mean that he's playing out of control. He's a 6'3" guard with great size and length and strength and energy, and he's a developing shooter. And just imagine this, right? You bring Devin Carter off your bench to play 22 minutes a game as your backup point guard. He's going to do good things on both sides of the court is the easiest, best way to put it. If you're not interested in that, you're probably not interested in winning is what I'd say. So you should probably grab Devin Carter with a pick within the first 16 picks of the draft. I think you're muted.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that you should heavily consider investing in Devin Carter if you're a team that's serious about winning. Is he going to change the entire future of your franchise like a Victor Wembanyama? He is not. But if you already have an infrastructure and you're a team that's looking to win games and you're kind of strapped for cash and like there's not a lot of avenues for you to improve, but you have this draft pick, Devin Carter, he could potentially be that guy for you. So all right, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back on the other side, we will hit Duke's Jared McCain. All right, Albert, we are back to break down Duke freshman Jared McCain, who I'm excited to talk about with you. This is a guy that we got to see together for a week in person at the Nike Hoop Summit last year now, coming up on a year. So Jared McCain is a 6'3" guard from Duke, 197 pounds. He will be 20.3 years old on draft night. So, he's a little bit old for, a freshman, similar to like Brandon Miller last year was a little bit old as well. So like, ultimately it'd be nice if he was younger, but he's not. So it is what it is. But he is playing 31.1 minutes per game, averaging 14 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 1.9 assists to 1.2 turnovers, 1.1 steal, 0.0 blocks. Shooting 46.5% from the field, 41.5% from three on 5.7 attempts per game, 86.8% from the free throw line on 2.2 attempts per game. Preseason stock price had McCain, ESPN had him at 20. No Ceilings had him at 18. Bleacher Report had him at 59. Yahoo did not have him ranked. The Athletic had him at 16. Tankathon had him at 33. He was the 25th ranked prospect on the DraftDAC IPO with an average stock price of 31.8. Currently, ESPN has him at 19. No Ceilings has him at 15. Bleacher Report has him at 11. The Ringer has him at 16. The Athletic has him at 18. Tankathon at 23. Average price of 17. So, Albert, is Jared McCain stock priced too high, too low, or is it just right?
What was the number again, Corey?
17.
17. I'm going to say too low. I have Jared McCain at 15 right now. And moving, right, is kind of where my head's at. I think I'm really excited to get into his scout. It's going to be a different vibe from the Devin Carter aspect of this episode, but there are going to be different things about Jared McCain's game that will maybe get us just as excited. So I like him a ton. Even though I saw him with you at Nike Hoop Summit, I felt like I underrated him this season for a lot of, various reasons. But yeah, just a guy who kind of shot the cover off the ball. And I don't think gets as much talk about him being, one of the top shooters in all of college basketball. I think he's really good. So yeah, I'm going to say too low.
Yeah, I also have him higher than this, so I think it's a little low as well. I have him at 14. I think he's really, really good as well. Like, I think for me, I think we always knew he was good and he could play, but we were always like, is he a guy that is definitely somebody who is going to be in this draft? Right? Like, just thinking like he might be a dude who is the kind of odd man out from a draft perspective. Tyrese Proctor had a lot of hype coming into the year, right? People had him in the top 5 coming into the year. Filipowski, Jeremy Roach was back. It's like a lot of mouths to feed there, right? Like, so it's kind of like, is he going to have enough shots to really get off enough? And he's just kind of like willed himself to be an integral part of the rotation, their best guard. Like, he's, like you mentioned, like might be one of the best shooters in this draft. I mean, his shooting numbers are legit. 41.5% from 3 and 87% from the line. The free throws, not a ton of volume, but like, I mean, he's just a phenomenal shooter. Had multiple, games where he went off. Huge tournament game, like a dude who's not afraid of the lights. We've talked about before on the show how charismatic he is in person, speaking to you, eye contact, smiling, like totally engaged in the conversation. And that is, not how every person you meet in life, every prospect you meet in life, every executive you meet in life is gonna, behave. Like Jared McCain makes you feel like, oh, we're having a conversation. And I think that energy and that he shows from being a guy who's comfortable in his own skin and like doing stuff, around the school, around Duke, and, being invested in that community, and like just his ability to infect that energy on the Duke team. Like, that kind of stuff is like important for a basketball player, like, like building chemistry and culture and all of that stuff. And he has all of those intangibles on top of the fact that he's like a good basketball player. Right. So, he's just kind of left everyone no choice to just be like, hey, like, you have to fully pay attention to me. Because I'm here and like I have, a skill that is, perhaps the most valued skill in the entire league. So with that said, I'm going to give you $10 to invest in Jared McCain, Rob Dillingham, and Isaiah Collier.
Jesus. What are you doing to me, man? Okay. Okay. So to give you a little bit of where my brain's at right now, Rob, just really good freshman season. Way better freshman season than I think we expected. Really rough end to the season, not just for him, but for the team. That's such an unfortunate way to end their season, right? The way that things went. Collier, just nightmare start to his freshman season. Goes out with injury, comes back, plays really well after his injury. I really liked a lot of the stuff that I saw from Collier, even though I was kind of out on him for a while. Even seeing him in person, I was like, this is better than the beginning of the year. He's not throwing the ball to the other team every single time, type of stuff. And then Jared McCain, kind of that steady hand. McCain just super steady throughout the year. So this is what I'm going to do. I think ultimately, damn, am I gonna? I don't know. I don't really like where my head is going, because like a part of me wants to give Jared McCain more than Rob Dillingham, but it's like, am I being too crazy? So let's do this. Oh, because Corey, man, the Dillingham one's tough, because then we start talking about like ceiling, like. I hate this. Okay. No. You know what? I'm gonna do my thing. Ready? Here we go.
Trust your
I'm gonna go. Yeah, let's go. Jared McCain, not Garrett McCain. Don't know who that is. Jared McCain. I'm gonna give $4.50 to. Okay, and I'm Asian, so the math should work out at the end. $4.50 to Jared McCain. I'm gonna give $3. $3.50 to Rob Dillingham. Okay, dollar difference there. Don't kill me. And then the Asian in me says $2 left. So $2 left for Isaiah Collier is where we're gonna go. And this was a hard one. This was like this might have been the hardest one you've ever asked me, Corey, just because there's a part of me that wonders, like, am I being too harsh on Rob right now? But then again, like, a dollar difference isn't the end of the world. But then a lot of listeners might be like, yo, what the hell? Rob should be top five. I don't know if I'm there anymore. I don't know. This is freaking hard.
I like your white guy impression.
Is that a white guy?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay. So no, I think it's totally fair. I think it is. I put it on Twitter today. Like, Maxwell tweeted out, like, who are two guys that you think are in similar tiers that are actually like separated on most boards? And mine were Rob Dillingham and Jared McCain. So like D Stevens in the comments says, are you guys willing to admit that McCain is safer? And I do think that McCain is a little safer. Because like, if you're looking at Rob, his big sell is like he could be this explosive scorer who, like, his nickname Rob with the shifts, right? Like, he can go and get a bucket and all that. But it's like small guard, small frame, and like he can get really hot. And he's made huge strides. I like him a lot as a player.
Yeah.
But there are outcomes where like he just might be like your sixth man. He might be
Bones Island,
your seventh man, right? Like that. Those are your outcomes for him too. Like, and if you're drafting that, like, I think he was second overall on Bleacher Report's mock today, right? So like, he might not return that kind of value.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, McCain is being talked about as more of a guy who like maybe is talked about at the end of the lottery, in that like 14 to 20 range. So like, yeah, I think he is safer. Now, as far as how I'll split my money up, I'm going to invest $4.25 into Rob Dillingham, $3.75 into Jared McCain, and $2 into Collier. Now, the reason I'm going to give a little bit more to Rob is because he's a little bit younger.
Sure.
I think he's shown more as a playmaker this year.
Yeah.
But there are things about Jared where I'm like, hey, like, if this dude is on, like, becomes a more impactful player, like, I'm not going to bat an eye at that. Like, much better frame, he rebounds really well for a guard. And he's had as many like big time scoring outbursts.
Yep.
So I think he's got a little bit, like, it might not be as like getting deep into his bag as Dillingham, but like he's got a bag, Jared McCain. Like he's very efficient with how he gets to his stuff, and he can finish at the rim really well. Like there are questions about Rob as a finisher. So I think it's a good argument. Now, Collier, you mentioned he made massive improvements toward the end of the year. He's the guy that if you were like probably to pick any of these guards' frames, right, you would take that. He's got the speed downhill. He's a bully. He's capable of making really high level passing reads, all that stuff. Ultimately, like, I just don't think he's going to be one of the best guards in the league. And I don't think he's going to have an easy time playing in a role where he doesn't have the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
Both of these guys can play off and on the ball.
Yeah, that is a major difference. I'm not going to say the number, but Corey, I've told you in private, I watching Isaiah Collier warm up, he missed a lot of threes in a row. And it's a real concern. That jumper needs a lot of work and it needs to be fixed with that jumper. Meanwhile, Jared McCain was just one of the best shooters in college basketball this season. So I know it's never that simplified and that, easy to just be like, oh, he's a better shooter, better prospect. It's never that way. I hope you enjoyed that different voice I just used right now. But with McCain, dude, it's just I think someone in the chat. Let me take a look. Someone in the chat just said it before too. I think a little bit safer, man, is kind of how I feel. Yeah, Steven was like, "Are you guys willing to admit that McCain is safer?" I think I'm right there with you, D. Like, sounds weird, but I'm right there. There's a safeness to him and an offensive versatility to him that I really enjoy. That obviously we're going to talk about. And you mentioned it, Corey. 5 rebounds a game, pretty good for a 6'3" guard. Not as good as Devin Carter, but still pretty damn good. So
yeah, pretty damn good. Yeah, and to be fair to the warm-ups, Devin Carter missed probably like 60 to 65% of his shots in warm-ups when I saw him over the 2 games. So, and then he came out on the first shot and he hit like this fall away out of bounds logo 3. Then I was like, let's fucking go. But let's get into the McCain scout. Because again, I think that he's a really underrated prospect. And part of the reason, obviously we're mentioning the shooting, like the shooting is elite. Yeah. It's elite. He can shoot it off the bounce. He can shoot it off the catch. It looks the same literally every single time. Like he seems pretty undeterred by a hand in his face. The volume is really, really good. He's got range. Like he can really, like his shot prep is phenomenal. He can get into his shot like off a hard plant. Like he'll come off like a screen really hard and have the defender kind of trailing, and then he'll just stop. He'll slam on the brakes. The defender will keep his forward momentum, and then he'll, be right into his shot prep perfectly on balance. D. Steven says, look at his bump offs. Like he uses his thick body well, like agreed. Like he'll dip his shoulder, create a little space. He's just an awesome shooter. He can, whether he's on the ball, off the ball, he's really good. In transition, he'll run to a spot, right? Like there's not really a ton where you're like, I don't know if this works.
Corey, the point that you made about him stopping, I think is so important because that's something you see, like he'll bring the ball up in transition and literally just pump the brakes and it just looks exactly the same as if, he was shooting off the catch. What I wrote in my notes is he's built like a fire hydrant. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. Like he is short and he doesn't have the longest arms, but he's really compact. That center of gravity with him is awesome. He's really balanced. And I think his physique and the way that he's built kind of helps him with that stopping stuff. Like because he's not crazy long and has like a lot of moving parts, when he does come to a sudden stop, he can get, he can find his balance a lot faster. And so that's something that I really enjoyed with him. The shooting stroke looks beautiful in my opinion. It looks, and you said it, like the mechanics of it look great. He could shoot it off the catch a little bit. He's shown some stuff off the dribble as well. But Duke just was like, hey, with Roach and Proctor and Filipowski, we're going to need you to space the floor a ton. And he did that beautifully. He did that. He did exactly what they asked him to do and did a great job of that. And I don't know. Just watching the stroke, it's funny because I was writing my piece on Cody Williams, and Cody Williams and Jared McCain shot the same percentage from three this season, but McCain took like 150 of them, and Cody Williams took like 40 or 50. I don't remember the exact number, but big difference in volume, right? And with McCain, it's that 41% is not, a fluke. Like he did it with good volume this season and went in a ton. So, and then, beyond that, he showed some stuff in the mid range, and his finish, we'll get to his finishing later, but his finishing was good too. But just a guy that just if we're just focusing on the shooting, that form looks really, really nice. And like you said, it looks the same every goddamn time. So that's usually a pretty good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we know he's an elite shooter. So let's talk about some of the other stuff in his game. We know he doesn't have the longest arms. We know he doesn't have he's not the bounciest, he's got 2 dunks on the year. One of them was, that nice poster there was very nice, but he's finishing 64% in the half court. Now he doesn't like put a ton of pressure on the rim at all times. Like he's not like consistently carving defenses up to get inside and like finishing. But he also doesn't have like crazy heavy usage on this team either, to where he is like, so the fact that he's able to finish, he's able to take contact, he's got really good touch around the rim. The fact that he has all that stuff, I think, and he's not just like a one-trick pony where it's like, all right, he's a shooter, but he's really poor around the rim. To me, I think that's pretty important. And it's just another wrinkle in his game, right? That like makes him like, oh, like he's a real scorer. Like there's more to him than just being a guy who has to stick outside of the paint and just stand there and catch and shoot or whatever. Like he can actually get in the paint, and you don't have to worry about him looking foolish and unprepared for that moment.
Yeah, I mean, Corey, before when you talked about Devin Carter, right, and how Devin Carter can leverage some of that new shooting gravity that he's earned this year, and curling some of that into the lane, Jared McCain does a really good job of that. There are some drives that he had throughout the season going middle. He just did a great job. Great physique there. But Jared McCain had some drives this season. I also want to give him credit, can finish with both hands. A lot of really nice left-handed layups. But with him, Corey, he doesn't have elite vertical pop or even like high, above average vertical pop, but it's pretty good. And the fact that he is so compact, like he can be kind of like a bowling ball coming downhill and going, into a guy's chest. Once again, he didn't do it a ton, but hey, context, right? Look at the team that he played on. We mentioned it already. Roach, Proctor, Filipowski, Mark Mitchell wants to post up once in a while. Like it's a weird team that he played on, right? So I think with McCain, I'm not too worried about, I saw someone in the comments talking about like his assists on the season. I think a lot of that is contextual, but in terms of like his straight up driving, like look at this left hand finish. That's pretty damn nice.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do. And he did it consistently. This isn't like a flash in the pan type of thing with McCain. Like he does have a really strong left hand, and he knows how to, use that shooting gravity to his advantage when he needs to. And, yeah, so I'm there with you. I like the finishing with him. I think those numbers are not a fluke, and yeah, he definitely earned it this year.
So the other thing is that he's really good at playing off too, and using like a hop step and play, like a lot of Villanova guys do that. So he's able to do that, and that's how he's able to like kind of like get guys to, again, keep their momentum going one way, and then he can hop step and kind of shift into the opposite direction. And then he's also able to like get to that hop step and decide whether or not he's going to like take his momentum to the rim or whether he's going to like get into a floater. And I think because of his touch, because of like the way he's able to stay on balance, like I think he's going to be a guy who like is really able to utilize that floater at the next level. So, we talked about, in the chat, apparently before we got removed for policy violations for the second week in a row on the YouTube stream, but we still have everybody on Twitter rocking with us. So shout out to you guys watching. The contextual aspect about his playmaking, because that was one of the things that I thought he was like, at Hoop Summit. I was like, oh, he's a good passer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and when we look at the context of this team, you know, you mentioned kind of the roster construction. Like, you have Mark Mitchell, you have Ryan Young, you have, you know, just like a packed paint a lot of the time. Filipowski is a guy who like was a better shooter this year, but like percentage wise, is like been mediocre at best as a shooter. Like, there's not like a ton of true spacing that you really have to worry about him. So like, there are a lot of those packed paints. And then he just doesn't have the ball in his hands a ton to like go and create stuff. Like, but if you watch him operate ball screens, like the patience and poise, and one of the things he's really good at is getting guys in jail and just using that sturdy frame to make them play from behind, and then making the big have to guard two and play cat and mouse. So like, I think that he is going to be a dude who is like a good passer. And that's why I don't